Before I get started, I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being here because I know that it is a sacrifice. I come to conventions and festivals and courses for farming and also for physical therapy. I'm a physical therapist, and so I know that it is a sacrifice of your time and a sacrifice financially, a sacrifice in a lot of ways. So I don't take that for granted, and I don't take your time lightly. I am appreciative and thankful for the gift of your time. So thank you. I want this talk to be what you need. This is your festival. I want you to get out of this talk exactly what you need so that when you leave this tent, you will have functional, realistic nuggets of wisdom to use in your life. And so if I am talking about something and you need me to go more in depth about that, just raise your hand. If you have a question about something that I have said, because I am not perfect and sometimes I misspeak. Like today somebody said, "How far is your farm?" And I said 4.5 miles when I really meant 4.5 hours. So, slight difference. And my husband was there and he was like, "Oh, misspeak." So anyway, if you hear me say something and you think, "I don't think that's quite right," just yell at me because it might not be quite right. It's Saturday afternoon. We've all been talking a lot. We've probably had a lot of sun, a lot of sugar, a little sleep this weekend. So feel free to interrupt me at any time. But I'm going to talk to you today about why I believe homeschooling is the best choice for your family. You can do this, and I'm going to show you how to do this. You need to know who I am, though, because why would you even listen to what I have to say? So I'm a physical therapist turned farmer and homeschooler, and I live with my husband and our son on our Century family farm. It's been in my husband's family since 1882, so we're slightly older than Yellowstone, if you watch that show. And hopefully slightly more peaceful, a little less big words on our farm. But we raise grass-fed and grass-finished beef, pastured pork, pastured poultry, and pastured eggs. And where you will find me most days on the farm is you'll either find me on the farm, you'll find me teaching. I'm also a teacher and the president of our homeschool cooperative school in Greenville, which we have a cap. I keep a cap of 200 students per hour at that cooperative school. And some of you might think, "Man, that's a little school." And some people might think, "Whoa, that's a big school." And that's as big as I want it to be. It's a big school for where we live. We live in Greene County. It's halfway between Knoxville and Bristol, so East Tennessee. And we do have one of the bigger schools in our county and in the city. We have about a 3 or 4 year waiting list to get into our school, and we are pretty proud of what we do at our cooperative school. And I can talk to you all more about that if anybody is specifically interested in starting or developing or improving a homeschool cooperative school. Just come and find me. We might not get into the details of that here, but I can help you with that later. You'll also see me sometimes, as most moms are, in the kitchen. Sometimes if you look really hard, you might see me on a cooking show. I'm on a nationally syndicated cooking show called The Sporting Chef, and it's on, if you have Hulu or DirecTV or Dish TV, it's on the Sportsman's channel, the Outdoor Network, and then they finally release it too. However that works, I'm not really into all that. But we could ask Marty about that. I think he's coming later, so he could teach us all about that. And then they release it to Amazon Prime, and then YouTube. So that's usually where you'll find me. But today I'm here again to talk to you about homeschooling and why you should do that. There are so many reasons that I believe that homeschooling is important now, and I'm going to share those with you, and some of them are academic. The first reason that I believe that homeschooling is the best choice for your family now is because we live in chaotic times and society has changed drastically. When you go and you talk to your parents, so your kids' grandparents, or an elderly neighbor down the street, or really about anybody, what's the first thing that people say to you when you say, I'm going to pull little Johnny and little Susie out of school? They always say, what about the socialization, right? What about the socialization? And, I heard, I was talking to Joel Salatin Thursday night, not to drop names, but I was talking to Joel Thursday night, and he said the difference between socialization and being sociable is the difference between being a snot-nosed brat and knowing how to say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. And that's a choice for you to think about, but that's the question that everybody gets, right, when they're going to homeschool. And so after this talk, you should be able to change those naysayers into yay-sayers. When you look back at the history of our country, I'm a big history buff, so anytime that if anybody has seen me talk, you probably already know that. But every time I talk, you're going to get some Jesus, you're going to get some founding fathers, usually a little James Madison. I try to throw him in anywhere I can. And so today's history lesson is a quote from John Adams. I don't know if anybody has read that book, Adams, the biography that came out about him, or if anybody saw the miniseries that was actually on HBO, and it was really great. And he wrote this quote to his wife, Abigail, his friend. They always, when they wrote letters to each other, they always called each other friend. But he wrote this to Abigail, and he said that he wanted to study politics and war so that his sons would be free to study mathematics and philosophy, and that they would study mathematics and philosophy so that their kids could then start studying painting and poetry, music, tapestry, all those things. And when you look back at the history of this country, you will see times that are really tough, right? Said another way, tough times make tough men make easy times make weak men, and weak men make tough times. So it's just a cycle, right? And when you look back at our country, generally, the overview that you can see is this cycle of, look back at the 1700s, and you see really hard times, which made tough men who then stood up, tough men and women, the men stood up. They fought to make us a free country. Then they had so much wisdom, so much knowledge, so much grit that they were able to work beside each other. And we look back, right, and we think, it was such great times. A lot of them hated each other, but they were still able to come together and work. We're so easily offended in America now if you don't agree with one thing that somebody says. Not necessarily you, but the general you. People get offended so easily, and they just walk away. There's no grit. But back then, they stuck it out. They wrote the laws. They came up with this whole country. It's hard enough to start a farm, right? Can you imagine starting a whole country from scratch? But they did that. And then they created easier times for us. So then if you look back at the early 1800s, what you see is, what do you remember from the early 1800s? You remember all those compromises, right? The Compromise of 1820, the Compromise of 1850, the Missouri Compromise. All these compromises where people didn't want to make decisions, and so they were just kicking the can down the road, which created really tough times. So then we had a terrible war. Then we had a terrible time after the war. We had to really rise up again. So then you had those tough men coming out of those tough times, right? And then they created easy times for us. Then We had the 1920s. What does everybody remember from the 1920s? The Great Gatsby, right? That was the time of life when everybody was having a great time, partying and drinking champagne, dancing. What came next? Stock market crash, right? The Great Depression. What came out of the Great Depression? Those hard times created very tough men and women who then went and fought and died for us so that we are a free nation and a free world today. And I mean, if it weren't for the greatest generation, our world would be totally different. Like those men and women, along with Winston Churchill, they were the ones that stopped. They were the only ones that stood up against Germany, and they turned this world around. So then what happened after World War II? Those men and women put down their guns, put down their weapons, picked up whatever they needed to do their jobs, and went back and raised families and made an easy life for their kids. So if you look, that's just generally, but if you look back at the last 60 years, what I believe is you will see, what I believe is that you see that the family is under attack in America. We have tried to remove God from society. And so we have created some really tough times that we're living in right now and that your kids are living in. When you look back at the 1960s, you see the sexual revolution, the introduction of the pill, the first time in history when women were finally able to say, oh, I can do what I want when I want, and I'm going to then put off having a family. I'm able to choose that now. Then in the 1970s, you had the introduction of the no-fault divorce. Do you all know who signed that into law, the first law? Anybody? That was Ronald Reagan, actually. He signed that into law in California in the 1970s. And towards the end of his life, he said that was the greatest regret of his life. Because now, no-fault divorce is... that's the majority of divorces in America today. 70% of divorces are considered no-fault divorce. Before 1970, before he signed that into law, you either had to be abandoned, abused, or you had to be a victim of adultery to get a divorce. And then after Ronald Reagan signed that into law, it became, you could get a divorce because you weren't happy. That hugely affected the tapestry of the family in America. Then in the 1980s, you had a rise of materialism and commercialism. It was the me decade, right? Me, 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 me. We went from a country that, John F. Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. We flipped that, right? We flipped that script and we said, what can people do for me? We saw that also in the 1990s, and you see that today too. But in the 1990s, you had a rise in homosexuality and promiscuity. And then today, we see what's out there. We see an LGBTQ movement and pedophilia movements, where if you watch the news now, you can see stories of, if they're of age to consent, right? Instead of, it's wrong, pedophilia is wrong across the board too. Well, if they are of consent. So the family is under attack. And it reminds me of the book of Judges, where over and over, the quotes from the book of Judges, the quotes are, the people did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. I don't know about you, but I'm seeing that every time I turn on the TV, every time. We are being controlled by a very small segment of society. Do y'all know who this guy is? Do you? Would you have known 3 months ago who this guy is? He's a cutie patootie, right? He's a cutie patootie. This guy is Harrison Butker. I'm not a huge NFL fan, so I didn't know who he was, but he is the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. And he is a big reason that they won the Super Bowl, right? That they are world champions. So this little guy, he is very successful at what he does. He is a devout, a very strong Catholic. He's very strong in his faith. And after I did a little digging into his life, and after the Super Bowl wins, he goes to a monastery, and he stays there for a time of fasting, prayer, and meditation for 7 days. And he really gets back to the basics of his faith. Very strong, very devout man of faith. So then earlier this spring, if you don't know, are there people who don't know him? Yeah, okay. All right, so the story about him is that probably in April, this cutie patootie guy, he gets asked by a small, private Catholic university to come and speak at their commencement address for their graduation. And so he is a citizen of America, and he said, sure, I'll do that. So he went as a Catholic man, a practicing Catholic man of faith, to this small, private Catholic institution and gave a commencement address where he espoused his views. And he said a lot of things. If you haven't read or heard his speech, it's not very long, and it's really good because I went back and I looked it up. And in his speech, what he said was, he said many things, but the one that got him in trouble was he said to the women, he said, some people here are going to tell you, and some people in the world are going to tell you that the best thing that you can do in your life is go out and get a really high-paying job and go from job to job and degree to degree. And he said, but I'm here to tell you, and he choked up a little bit at this, and he said, I am here because my wife has chosen to be a mom, and she stays home with our children, and she's raising our children. And he said, he said something like, that's the best gift that I have been given. But he really spoke about his wife and how meaningful her sacrifice was to stay at home. He was quite respectful to his wife, very loving. And at the end of his speech, everybody stood up. Everybody gave him a standing ovation. Applause, 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 applause. Everybody was happy. And then NBC News got a hold of it. And people said, oh, he's terrible. He's a terrible human. He needs to be fired. And the Kansas City, I've got two quotes here one was from the Kansas City newspaper, and then the other is the title of the article that was in the Nashville newspaper. So I just brought those two up. There are tons and tons and tons. Matter of fact, if you looked up during the uproar about 3 weeks ago, if you looked up Harrison Butker, you would find more negative articles about him than you did about Sean Combs. Do y'all know who Sean Combs is? Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, whatever he goes by. They had, and is everybody aware of his issues? Everybody? Okay, yeah. So he's gotten into some trouble because he's on video beating up his girlfriend in the hallway of a hotel. But there are more negative stories about this guy speaking about his views than there are about a man beating a woman on camera. I mean, this is insanity, right? It's insane. Right now we're in the middle of Pride Month. We're hearing that in the newspapers and seeing it on TV over and over and over. But when you look at the stats, 6% of the population identifies as LGBTQ, and 1% of the marriages in America are same-sex unions. So by and large, traditional families are still outnumbering this movement. But what do you hear more about in the news? And my husband and I were talking when I was doing all this research, and I'll just say parenthetically, I am a math and science girl. So when I give a talk, when I write a paper, I'm going to cite everything that I do. You all do not need my opinion. You need to learn, right? We all need to learn. I'm not saying you need to learn. We all need to learn. So I'm not up here. I don't have time to go and listen to somebody's opinion, right? I want the facts. And so everything that I say has been researched. And I will have footnotes and cites for all these stats that I'm giving you. But please know that I'm not up here just talking off the top of my head. But my husband and I were talking about, okay, well, he said, what percentage of America identifies as hunters? Anybody want to guess? 6%. 6% are hunters. 12% identify as fishermen and fisherwomen. So, you think about, okay, well then, statistically, you should be hearing about the same number of news reports, right? But I'm sure you all have heard about the same number of reports on hunters that I do. And we live in a rural area. So that's the number one reason that I believe that homeschooling is the best choice now, is that our society has changed, and it is continuing to change. Number two, I believe that society is lying to you, and more importantly, society is lying to your kids. Your kids are being inundated with untruth after untruth, okay, day in, day out. And the only way that you can combat these untruths is to pour truth in, because they're not getting truth out in the world. Some of the lies that society tells us, I'm very worried now about Ann. Did everybody see Ann Scott this morning talking about tripping over the line? Did y'all see that? Now I'm like, oh, don't want to trip. Anyway, you should ask her about that sometime. She's got lots of pictures. But some lies that society tells us and tells our kids is this lie about emotionalism. Well, I feel this way. I feel like, I'm not happy right now, or I feel like a cat or a rabbit or a snake or a turtle or a broomstick, or, what I feel. Well, little Johnny, little Susie, what you feel is true. That's your truth, right? Emotionalism. And then the truth relativism about, well, if it's true to you, 2 + 2 generally is 4, but if you think 2 + 2 is 5, we might go with it. If it's true to you, then it's true to you. But really, truth is truth, right? If it's true here in Columbia, Tennessee, and it's true in London, right? Truth is truth. And people believe now, society tells us now, that our feelings are other people's responsibilities. That's why people are getting canceled left and right. Interestingly enough, I didn't say this, but this Harrison Butker guy, he was in such hot water. The Twitter account the official Twitter account for the city of Kansas City, where he works and lives, they doxed him. Do y'all know what that is? They put out his personal information, where he lives, without his knowledge and without his consent, because they didn't agree with him. So, he's using his First Amendment right to speak about what he believes at this small, private place that shared his opinion and his belief, and somebody didn't like it. And so the city where he lives and works put out his personal information and said, if you don't like Harrison Butker and what he said, you go tell him. They had to take that down, obviously. But, people believe now that that's right. People believe that that's their right and their responsibility. And then the other one is this belief that my feelings, how I feel right now, will never change. And that's the map to my destination in life, right? Think about all these things that you're hearing in the news. That's where that's coming from. The self-victimization, where we avoid responsibility, we blame others, we have poor time management. We don't want to work through problems. And I'll go over some of these in a little bit again. Some of these overlap, but all of these are true, and they overlap because there is truth in them, I believe. We have word theft, where words don't mean the same things that words used to mean. If you look at the word gender from a dictionary 100 years ago, I told you all that we live on a century farm. It's been in my husband's family since 1882, and so we have a lot of old junk. And some of it is very useful, like the old dictionaries. If I look at the word gender from the dictionary in like 1890 to 1900, what I'll see is male or female. But now it has been added to the Webster's Dictionary, this quote here: gender more often refers to cultural and societal differences and sometimes encompasses a broader range of identities than the binary of male and female. I don't even know what that means. That is straight gobbledygook, is what that is. Family, the term family is changing. Tolerance, you got even tolerance has two definitions now, right? If there's somebody, if there's somebody over here, let's say a runner in high school or college, and the runner is a biological male but feels like a female, then where do they want the runner to run, right? And if you don't accept that this biological male runner who wants to run as a female, if you don't accept that, you're intolerant. But then on the other side, if I stood up here and I said, boy, I really like Thomas Jefferson, then there would be people who said, how can you say that? If I said, man, he had a lot of foresight. He did a lot of great things for our country. He's so wise in agriculture. Some people would come to me and say, you are intolerant because I like that aspect of his life, right? Some people say on one hand, you have to accept everything of the person. And then on the other side, oh no, if you accept one thing of the person. So intolerance and tolerance have different meanings depending on what side of the spectrum you're on. But it's definitely different. The number 3 reason that I believe that homeschooling is the best choice for your family now is that you are uniquely called by God to be the gatekeeper of your home. You are uniquely called to be the protector of your children. There are things coming into our homes now that 40 years ago, my parents didn't have to worry about. That 60 years ago, my grandparents didn't worry about with my parents. But now, there are so many things coming into your home. You need to be hyper vigilant. It never stops. If your desire is to be at home with your children, there is no greater calling. The world has tons of men and women who are out punching the time clocks, who are climbing the corporate ladders. But the biggest responsibility that you have is this calling by God, this unique calling by God to be the protector and the gatekeeper of your children. The first thing that you've got to really be on guard about is technology. Technology, there are some great things about technology, right? I mean, you're just watching the UT game. Do I want to know? I don't want to know? Uh-oh. My husband's pacing. Yeah, he doesn't want to know either. He's shaking me off about the game. Yeah. So he was streaming the game, right? My husband is really happy about this. We are currently streaming Downton Abbey at my house, and he's so happy about that. So there are some great things about technology, but there are also some really difficult things, right? And unless you are Amish, you're going to have to work with technology. My son is a rising senior, and so he takes dual enrollment classes. We don't do any web-based learning at our house, and we really don't do a lot in our homeschool cooperative school, but everything that he does at college, even if he's physically in the classroom, everything's turned in online. His grades are online. I mean, even I run a Google Classroom for my high school classes now just because it's so much easier. And I can get information out, and kids can get information to me, right? So technology is here, and we're going to have to learn to live with it. It is the key that unlocks the door to so many things. Some of them are good, like I said, and some of them are not so good. The first thing we're going to talk about is the elephant in the room. It's pornography. If you can see this graph, I hope everybody can see it. What you'll see is the black bar is the number of pornographic magazines sold in America in the year 1953, okay, the entire year. Then the blue bar is the number of visits to a website called Pornhub per minute in 2019. So again, the black is the number of Playboy magazines sold in the year, and the blue is the number of pornographic website visits per minute. So what we see is an exponential increase in pornography addiction and consumption, well, consumption and then addiction, because it's so much easier, right? And now the age of the age where you were introduced has decreased. It's now between 5 and 9 years of age. And the percentage of kids exposing themselves to pornography has jumped from 8% in 1950 to 79% today. There are laws of technology and health. When you, if your kids go to public school, they are given a device, and they are on said device for a lot of hours a day. But what you see across time is that you see a rise in sleep problems. You see a rise in depression and anxiety. You see an increase in obesity. And here are some numbers to go along with that. 73% of teenagers today are not dating because they either have something better to do or I am in a relationship, right? They're on their screen and they're texting. But as you all know, virtual relationships are not the same as real relationships. And then according to Medium Magazine, the human attention span is 8 seconds. So that's less than a goldfish. We're not doing too good. For every 30 minutes of screen time, teens lose 16 minutes of sleep. And we're going to come back to that. That is really important. Really important. For every 30 minutes of screen time, teens lose 16 minutes of sleep. And y'all know, I mean, some of you I have talked to, and you haven't been sleeping very good this weekend. You're in a different place. You're maybe in a hotel or an Airbnb or a camper, and you're just not sleeping very well. And, you know, just like I said, I said 4.5 miles when I went 4.5 hours. I mean, it's easy to misspeak. It's easy to make decisions that aren't the best decisions when we are losing sleep. And obesity is the number one outcome of screen media exposure over time. Pop culture. Your children are inundated with alternative truths and lifestyles through pop culture. Traditional families are not celebrated in society. Schools are pop culture, and you can see a huge rise in the number of recurring characters on sitcoms being LGBTQ across the channels. It's highest on ABC and Disney. So it used to be, that you could pop on a Disney movie or a Disney show and walk out the room and know your kid was watching something fun and maybe learn a little bit. But now you have to really vet everything that's coming in. And the ratio in mainstream media, mainstream news, the ratio of positive to negative news stories on LGBTQ issues, it's 5-1. So 5 positive stories for every negative story. And just in case you think that your kids aren't influenced by this is a graph across generations of people identifying as LGBTQ. So if you can't see that, what I will, if you can't see the numbers, what's important is the blue. That's the generation that's like 18 to 30-year-olds right now, right? They don't ask kids, generally when you're doing a scientific study, you don't go under 18, especially under 16. So that's the 18-year-olds, the 20-year-olds. Then down to the green, that's the greatest generation. Those are the folks that came out of World War II and even probably fought in World War II. So that's almost zero, but look at the difference across the generations. Then furries. I don't know if are you all familiar with furries? Everybody is, yeah. Some of you are. Are there people who don't know what in the world they are? Yeah, okay. So furries are people who believe they are trapped in a human body, but actually should be a cat or a dog. And I say cat because that's most of them, but cats or dogs or animals of some sort. And I don't know if you all are dealing with this where you live, but in our little town, in our little county, which is rural, we have a lot of furries in our middle school. So many, in fact, that they are having to put out litter boxes for these children to use. And when I first heard that, I thought that was a joke, and it's not. And so we also had, not the county that I live in, but one of the next one over, one of the kids failed, quote unquote, failed a verbal test from the teacher because the teacher was asking the question, the kid was answering in cat talk. And so the teacher was like, well, you failed that test. And then the parents came back and said, no, she was speaking in cat. You have to accept that. And the teacher had to accept that. So there are lawsuits around. They're not as many as some of the other issues that are out there, but there are people who are fighting for furries' rights in school. We had 2 furries last year, 2 kids who identified as furries last year in our cooperative school, and I said, we are not a furry-friendly facility. We're not. We cannot allow that, and so we were able to take care of that. But it is an issue that's coming out. Now, what you also see is most of them are young, and most of them also have some other issues going on too, some other mental health issues. But you're called to give your kids a firm foundation. Just like when Moses was giving the law a second time to the Israelites, and he said, you need to be talking about truths to your kids when you're sitting down, when you're rising up, when you're walking down the street. You need to keep them. It was the first cheat sheet. He was telling you to write them on your hands, right? Write the notes on your hands, like a lot of us did probably in the 80s to get through that math test. But write them on your hands. Think about them. Keep them as frontals on your forehead. Remember them, because if you don't remember them, the writer of Hebrews said, if you don't think about the truths, you're going to forget them. You're going to fall away. And if you instill a strong foundation, you can launch your kids into the world with success. In Psalm 127, verse 4, it says, like arrows in the hands of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. But you've got to be teaching your kids about God. They will not learn about him anywhere else. So the number 4 reason that I believe that homeschooling is the best option now is that public school's not producing academic excellence. And you could make the argument that what they are pushing is social justice. I keep asking what kids are learning, because based on the numbers that I'm going to show you here, it's not academics. At least 50% of public schoolers are below grade level in at least one subject. So at least half of the children in public school are not where they need to be in at least one subject. And you can see that is a government website that gives that information. According to the U.S. Department of Education, 37% of public schoolers are below grade level in reading. 49% are below grade level in math. That's right at 50%. 87% of high school graduates are not proficient in U.S. history, which makes me so sad. And also, it never changes. So, like, if there's something that you should probably get in 12 years in school, it could be history, because it doesn't change. And in Tennessee, 60% of third graders are not at grade level for ELA. And that is something that we celebrate in Tennessee. I don't know if y'all are in Tennessee, but we just celebrate that, because in 2017, it was 66% of third graders were not proficient and not at grade level for ELA. So we've gone down from 66% not proficient to now 60% not proficient, and we are just so proud of that. The average high school, and so all of that, right? All of that, and the average high school student has 30 plus hours per week of homework. So 30 plus hours per week of homework, okay? Keep that in mind. Who's in charge of your kids? This goes back to what I just said. We are forsaking academic rigor for social justice. This is an article from Montclair State University in New Jersey. I talked to some folks from New Jersey just yesterday, and glad y'all are down here and participating in this weekend. So this article is from multiple professors at Montclair State University, and what you can see in bold letters is they want sex education to be taught just like math. So when you introduce math, you introduce sex education. They're teaching gender identity in elementary school, and of course you all have heard on the news about this critical race theory, white privilege, on and on and on. And then they're also diagnosing children. Gender dysphoria and education. I don't know if anybody, have you all, anybody picked up the new Joel Salatin book, Homestead Tsunami? We were talking about that the other night, and those two are, homesteading and homeschooling, are so closely related. And he was actually, before he even knew that I was going to talk about this, he started talking about gender dysphoria and how much the diagnoses have increased, the number of diagnoses in children. And so there are some stats for you. They're all from the British Medical Journal, General Psychiatry, and the medical news site. But the diagnosis of gender dysphoria has tripled in recent years, tripled the number of diagnoses. There is a statistically sharp rise at age 11, and the peak age of diagnosis is 17 years old. So in school, and there are a lot of lawsuits now between parents and school systems because these parents are not finding out when they need to find out, or at least when the parents believe they need to find out. And so that is something that's being fought out right now in our legal system. And I will say anecdotally, that has happened to a really good friend of mine. She and her husband have 5 children. They are church goers. They love the Lord. They have raised their children exactly like they feel is right. And they have a set of twins, and one's at, well, I won't say where he is. One is at a very, very well-known, prominent university, not in the state, but called them as a freshman, so he wasn't 18 yet, and he said, I need my birth certificate. And so they just thought, it was something for school, gave him his birth certificate, and he went and had it changed. And so now he is Annie, and he is now on medication to become Annie, and they have no rights. They are completely gobsmacked by this. They did not see this coming, and it's devastating. They really feel like their hands are tied. They feel like they were not told in a timely manner to stop this from happening. The number of LGBTQ students in public high schools has increased from 11% in 2015 to 26%. So more than 1 in 4 students in public high schools identify that way. And then we're in a mental health crisis. We're in a health crisis with our kids. You can see all of these stats. All these stats are from a great book by Lisa D'Amour. It's called The Emotional Lives of Teenagers. But you can go through and see these stats. Mental health crisis, and just a health crisis. Like this morning, I had on the local NBC affiliate. I don't know if anybody saw this morning, just while I was getting ready, and I heard something, and I came running into the bedroom, and I said, turn that up, I've got to hear that. And so in Cheatham County, which is Ashland City, so rural compared to Nashville standards, maybe not rural compared to where you live, but we have friends who live up there. We've been up there. It's a lovely, lovely area. They have Narcan now in their classrooms for overdoses, right? So I said to my husband, I said, how in the world are kids learning advanced math when they are dealing with the kid beside of them needing Narcan in classes? It shouldn't be this way. You have a choice, but there is a health crisis, not just mental health crisis, but there is a mental health crisis. There is a physical health crisis in our schools today. This graph is it was from February of 2023, and I pulled it up because this is, KFF is a company that does a lot of statistics for different organizations. This is from the government. This is subjective reporting of depression and anxiety. And what I wanted you to see is across all adults in America who participated in this, what does it say? 32% of adults say that they have depression and or anxiety. But if you look at the 18-year-olds, that's 50%. 50% of the kids, 18-year-olds are saying that they have depression and anxiety. And what we're also seeing is that it used to be that very few teenagers received antidepressants, but they were going to have counseling. They were talking. But now what you see is a shift, a huge shift. Look at these numbers from 37% receiving antidepressants in the 80s to over 80% are receiving medication today. 80% of our kids are receiving medication, and we're decreasing the therapy. So we're saying, don't talk about your problems, kids. Just take this medicine. And it's not just that medicine, right? It's other medications too. It's psychotropic medications that you see are being given to our kids. Now, I put this slide up with these stats because there's a huge disparity there. Do you all see that? I mean, 17% of public high school or public school kids are receiving psychotropic medication like Ritalin, something to alter their behaviors. 35% of kids in the foster care system are being prescribed those, but less than 2% of homeschoolers are being prescribed those. So by and large in America, kids are on devices, being medicated, zoning out, and not talking about their issues. And it doesn't have to be this way. You are more capable than you believe and than you've been told, and so are your kids. You need to trust your abilities. The public sector would like to diminish your role as a parent, and I don't want to bum anybody out, but I'm going to show you some stats here in just a minute that are going to show you that your time's limited with your kids. Your kids can actually excel at home and do so in a more efficient manner. So going back to those numbers, this is a picture of my son and some friends right before our prom this year. We have a prom for our high schoolers, and there's lots of activities. But if you go back to the numbers, the average public high school student spends 35 hours at school without playing sports, okay, just in the classroom. 35 hours per week in the classroom, and then 30 hours plus of homework. So that's 65 hours a week, right? Versus the average homeschool student, high school student, spends 24 hours per week in academics with minimal homework. So we've got a huge difference in numbers, right? 65 hours a week versus 24 hours a week. So you would think, oh, well then the public school kids are kicking it. This is a graph showing the differences in achievement testing at the end of the year. The green graph, the green bars are the scores from homeschool kids, and the red or the pink, depending on where you are, that's the scores for public school kids. So what you see is across the board in every subject and in the combination subjects, you see much higher scores for the homeschool kids than the public school kids. Public school kids are they're learning a lot longer, and still not doing as well. Homeschool students graduate with a higher cumulative GPA than public schoolers. Oregon State University, not known as a hotbed of conservatism, found that homeschool students on average outperformed public school students by 30 points on standardized tests. Homeschool students have lower rates of depression and anxiety. Particularly boys are scoring higher, and especially in math tests. Homeschool students sleep on average 90 minutes more per night than public school students. That's huge. Nobody's getting enough sleep, right? Nobody's getting enough sleep. I see you yawning, nobody's getting enough sleep. No, you're good. It's after lunch. Nobody's getting enough sleep in America, right? High schoolers need 10 to 12 hours of sleep. So let's go with little Johnny and little Susie coming home. They're at school all day, right? They get home about 4:30. They've got, if you don't do, let's say that you as a family say we're not going to do homework on Sunday, so you take that 30 hours and you divide it by 6 days instead of 7. You've got 5 hours average of homework each day. So they come home at 4:30. They might feed the dogs, do some chores for an hour. Then you've got supper as a family, and then they sit down at 6:30 to do their homework. They don't get done with their homework until 11:30. They're up the next day at 6 to go to school, sometimes even earlier. They're not getting enough sleep. They're just not, even if they're not torqued out on technology. 87% of peer-reviewed studies on social, emotional, and psychological development show that homeschool students perform statistically significantly better than those in public school. And homeschool students have lower rates of drug use and lower number of sexual partners over a lifetime, and they're more active as adults in community. And then in college, praise the Lord, there are more homeschool kids getting scholarships, they are graduating on time, and they have a higher GPA overall. And your time is limited. Don't be bummed out here. This is a graph showing you your time with your kids. I think it's purple on here, if you can see that. With your family, the time with your kids is not very long. So once they're 15 to 18, after 18, they're pretty much spending time with somebody else. And then the other one is, you see the one way up at the top at the end, that's the alone. So be your own best friend. Give yourself some grace. Be kind to yourself, because you're going to need that. Here's another graph, and here it is. I took it out to where it just shows you the time with your kids. So 15 to 18, 15 goes down. Then the kids realize, oh, mom and dad are paying for everything. I need to be nice before I leave. So they spend some more time, and they're gone at 18. But you need to be the guardian of your home. So now, how should you homeschool? You need to first know your state requirements. I want everybody to look at this map. Find your state. Remember your color. Everybody got your state and your color? Everybody got it? So if you live in a green state, then your umbrella school is all you need to homeschool, okay? That's a pretty homeschool-friendly state. If you live in yellow, that's just one. And that's the hardest state to homeschool in. Isn't that a shocker? California is the most unfriendly state to homeschooling. If you live there, you have got to have an umbrella school, and you've got to be part of the Homeschool Legal Defense Fund, because you've got to have somebody who has your back. I don't get anything from the Homeschool Legal Defense Fund. I'm a member of that group, but I don't get anything from them, so this is not a paid advertisement. But you need them, because it's not very easy. If you live in an orange state, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to have anything. And then if you live in a blue state, that's most of them, then you must complete a notice of intent with the local homeschool or the local school board. And they've made that pretty easy in most states, especially after COVID. Before COVID, you usually had to go to the meeting and state your case at the meeting, but now generally it's just a letter. No matter, do you need that? Okay. No matter where you live, no matter what state you live in, I'm going to recommend that you belong to an umbrella school. You ready for the next one? Sorry. There you go. So get an umbrella school. My pick for an umbrella school is always going to be Home Life Academy. Home Life Academy is a great organization. They're not too expensive, and they can operate in all 50 states. If your kid wants to play sports at school, you may be tied to having the local school as your umbrella school. But if you're not playing sports, and you know a lot of places, like we have sports at our local at our co-op. At our cooperative school, we have sports, and so we have that covered. But if your kids want to play sports at school, you may need to be a member of your local school system. That may need to be your umbrella school. Number 3, you need to choose your techniques. And because of time, I may zip through these a little quickly. So if you need me, I'll be at tent. I think I'm at tent 91. I'm right across from the main stage and right beside the Salatin. So just go where everybody is, and then I'm next door. Because everybody wants to meet Joel and Daniel. I'm going to go through the 5 most common ways to homeschool in no particular order. The first one is Charlotte Mason. If you don't know who Charlotte Mason is, that's okay. I didn't either when I started, and I got yelled at by this lady at the park who told me I was going to be a failure as a homeschooler because I didn't know who Charlotte Mason was, and I didn't. But anyway, she was a lady that lived in England in the 1800s, and she realized that kids learn through hands-on activities, and so she was really big into that. And so if you look at a Charlotte Mason style textbook, like a science book from the 1950s, what you'll see is the lesson plan was, if you go to school near a creek, have the boys go down and catch a snake at the creek, bring the snake up, put it in an aquarium. I mean, this is really, this was in her science, is a 5th grade science textbook. Put the snake in the aquarium that the girls have gotten ready, and then watch the snake, feed the snake, lots of different things to see what the snake likes, what the snake doesn't like. Watch the snake for at least 2 weeks. Then you're going to kill the snake and dissect the snake. You're going to learn all about the snake through hands-on activities. Charlotte Mason style also uses a lot of living books, and if you don't know what a living book is, these are some examples of living books. Living books are the stack of books. Those are just some of my living books that we still have at home. But and then I was talking to somebody earlier about Robert McCloskey, and here he is again. That's the Homer Price, Make Way for Ducklings, Lentil is on there, Blueberries for Sal, all those books, and then Mr. Popper's Penguins. That was a favorite of my son's when he was in elementary school. But living books are books that are written by 1 or 2 people, and they have a love and a passion for the subject that they are writing about. It's different than a textbook where you just get, fact after fact after fact. Like, think about the Little House on the Prairie books. Those are also considered living books. Books that you read and you really enjoy and you learn from. Then there's unschooling. Unschooling, some people say that that's what people who are not organized do, but actually I think that requires the most organization from the parents, because if you unschool your kids drive your education, and you have to write everything for your kids. You have to come up with a curriculum. You have to come up with what you're going to do. You have to come up with every single bit of it, and it can be extremely successful. Extremely successful. It is, to me, it's the hardest way to homeschool. There's classical conversations. Classical conversations basically have 3 phases, kind of like the phases of elementary, middle, and high school. And if you are raising a future president or a lawyer, this may be the way that you want to go. The early phase is a grammar phase where they absorb and they memorize vocabulary, statistics, and information. Then the second phase, the kind of middle school-ish phase, they're doing some research, they're beginning their logic. And then the last phase is they are teaching, they are debating, they are speaking. It is a great way to educate your children if you have a community, a like-minded community with you. It's pretty hands-on for the parents who are teaching it. There's the traditional method. That's if you went to public school, that's what you did. You had a teacher, you had a textbook, and you worked through the module, then you took the test. That's what you did. And then there are unit studies. Unit studies use a lot of lap books. And here, these are some pictures of lap books. Lap books are so fun. I love unit studies, especially for elementary. Yeah.
Is it important to pick a style and stick with it?
No. A lot of people will do like did y'all hear that? He said, is it important to pick a style and stick with it? A lot of people do a mishmash. I do a mishmash. I did a lot of unit studies when my child was in elementary school, and it worked great. We did lap books. We did Mr. Popper's Penguins. That's such a great book. And so we checked that out. We also checked out when we were at the library. We checked out every book that we could on Antarctica. We looked at Shackleton. We looked at there's a really good junior biography about him and about what he did coming down to Antarctica. So we studied Antarctica, we studied penguins, we drew penguins, we cut penguins out, we studied the food webs, the food chains, we studied everything about the penguins. So we had this math game about penguins. So we did all of that. Now that he's in high school, it's more, it's almost more traditional now because you have to, like, how are you going to learn chemistry? You just got to do it. I mean, it's very Charlotte Mason. It's very hands-on, and the textbook is written in a Charlotte Mason style, but it is still traditional where he is working through the module, taking the test, and he must pass that before he goes on because I don't want him to blow up my house. So that's unit studies. If you love the library and Hobby Lobby, unit studies, that's going to be the way you want to do it. Choose your curriculum. There are tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of companies out there. And would you all like to see? Some companies, some homeschool curriculum companies next year? Would that be helpful? Okay, I can work on that for next year. These are some companies that I love. I love Saxon Math. People that hate Saxon Math hate it because it's so much work and there's so many problems. But I'm a big math and science girl, and the only way that you learn math is to repeat it and to go through it and to work through it, and it's boring. And you got to memorize those multiplication tables, and nobody wants to do that. And I'm sorry, that's awful, but you got to do it. Yes. Right. They have those teach them diligently throughout the United States. And so if you are around, there's one coming up at Myrtle Beach. There's one in, the one here in Nashville was a couple of months ago. It was Mm-hmm. They don't have it at the Opryland Hotel anymore? Okay. Yeah, so you'll find those in pockets around the country. So just look, it's teachthemdiligently.com. Or it used to be. That used to be their website, teachthemdiligently.com. Yep.
Quick question about homeschooling. Is that the same thing as hack schooling?
Hack school. Yeah. Different people call it different things, but yeah. Where you're writing everything, like if the kids are really into chickens, everything's going to be about chickens that year. You're going to have the chickens. You're going to raise the chickens. You need to call Joel Salatin and have him come down. Just send your kid to Joel Salatin for the year. That would be perfect. Or Daniel. Just say, Daniel was homeschooled. He can take it. He can do it. Yeah. But I love Apologia for Science. Winter Promise is a really, really, really sweet company. They're out of the New England area. It's a family-owned company, and they will send you everything that you need for that subject. It's wonderful. I use them for history and for literature and geography. They have great, great, great programs. Everything that you need is in a box, including all of their books that they want you to read. And you have week by week and day by day. You have everything you need, and the kid has everything that they need, the kid or the kids. So then they just go through and check it off when they complete it. It's really, really, really nice. And then Write Shop is what I recommend for grammar. They're very good. They have levels A through F or A through G for elementary, and then they have level 1 and level 2, and then you would go on into your high school literature and English. But what would it look like if you were able to step back from the public sector and write your own story? And what would it look like if you allowed your kids to do that too, and let your kids dream and have a little space in their day and in their time to where they're not at school for 35 hours a week and then doing 30 hours a week of homework? What if they went from 65 hours of work to 24 hours of work? What would that look like in your homestead? What would it look like on your farm? What would it look like for your family? What other great things could they accomplish? Great hobbies that they could start to tease out and to be a part of. You can do this. You can live this life you're dreaming of, whether it's homeschooling, or maybe y'all just were like, really, you just needed a nap, and so you thought you'd sit in here, and you're really here for Living Soil, or you're here to hear Marty. You can do this. If you are dreaming of this life, of this more self-sufficient lifestyle, you can do it. You're here doing the hard things. You're here learning. You can do what you are dreaming of. And I hope that you leave here encouraged by this talk and not like, oh my gosh, what a downer. Like, oh, she was such a downer. I want you to be encouraged. I want you to leave this room, this tent, with functional, realistic nuggets of wisdom that you can take. And when somebody says, oh, homeschooling, your kids won't be able to read, you can say, no. Do you know that 60% of the kids in the state of Tennessee are not on grade level for reading? Why would I do that? Why would I send them for 35 hours to school and then 30 hours of homework a week when I can do better? 87% of the studies show that these kids do better at home. 87% of the studies show that kids do better at home being homeschooled. They're there, they are doing it for less time, less angst, less mental problems, less physical problems, less medication. There are a lot of reasons to think about homeschooling. You can do it. This should be a QR code, I think, to our website. And then, you can also find me. Here's my other stuff. You can find me. We've got a cookbook that's out here. I'll be out here if you want to come by and chit-chat after this. Like I said, I'm right beside Joel Salatin. And then on the TV show. And anything that we do is Bales Farms. I'm not very creative. So we have a podcast and we have a blog and that kind of stuff. So I'm easy to find. So I'm really easy to find for the next hour. I'm just out there. So come out there if you want to see me. But thank you all very much.